Cool. Welcome to Mind Controllers, a podcast about shining the light on the psychological aspects behind some of our favorite video games. I'm your host, Brandon Craw, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Joe Moreno.
And today we're going to be talking about the characters of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Before we get too deep into the game and the discussion here, just want to give a spoiler warning because we are going to be talking about a lot of plot details, a lot of things that happen to the characters and throughout the game. I just want to put a spoiler warning right off the bat. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VII and you're interested in the story and you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and play that game, watch a playthrough, or do whatever you got to do, and then come back to us. Yeah, because
we'll
definitely don't want to ruin the experience. Yeah, we'll be here. We don't want to ruin some of the experience of some of the hard-hitting points of this game. And also, a lot of these characters, they might resemble someone in real life, but these are all fictional characters. We have no intention to draw not strings, I guess, draw arrows between some of the characters here and some real life people. We also don't have we're not licensed therapists, so we don't have any authority to diagnose anybody. So we are going to be talking about some psychological diagnoses and mental illnesses. We're kind of going to run through what it looks like when you have to put together a case study to give someone an official diagnosis. But all of this is just fictional. It's just for fun. We do not have any say in whether someone has any sort of disorder or not. So with that being said, let me give you a little bit of background information about the game. I first want to talk about the distinction between this remake game and the original, because it's something kind of interesting. With the remake, as the name suggests, this game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, is a remake of the original Final Fantasy VII. And that game came out in 1997, whereas this one came out in 2020. It kind of offers its own spin on the term of remake, since it's trying to do something different with the story. A lot of times when a game is remade or remastered nowadays, it is putting out the same game, but having it a bit more polished, making the graphics look better, having the combat be a bit more fine-tuned. And this game is trying to change some narrative beats. Now, the original Final Fantasy VII story was confined to just that game. And there were some spin-off games, but this one, it told the full story within that game. In this Final Fantasy VII Remake game, it only covers about a third of the original game, and it deviates from the original's plot. And you can tell that this happens in the game because this new enemy shows up called the Whispers. And now these Whispers are these ghost-like figures, kind of look like Death Eaters from Harry Potter. And they push the party to make the same plot decisions that are found in the original game. And whenever the party decides to deviate from those decisions, the Whispers show up and seemingly force this original plot onto them again. Mm-hmm. And the party tries to stray from this and make their own decisions. So, first spoiler here. Towards the end of the game, you defeat what you think is the leader of the Whispers that is kind of making you do all the same stuff in the original game. I do not know what that's going to look like going forward. Maybe the Whispers come back. I'm not sure. But it was kind of a neat symbolic triumph showing that they fought against this predetermination and have created their own plot line. So I thought that was pretty cool. And now for anyone who's unfamiliar with the background of the game and the story, this story follows members of an eco-terrorist group called Avalanche as they strive to take down Shinra, which is this quote-unquote evil company that harvests Mako. And now Mako is the lifeblood of the planet. It's the energy that surrounds everyone and everything. And Shinra is trying to harvest the Mako by creating these Mako harvesting reactors. And wherever they make these, it drains the resources from that immediate area. So it makes a lot of these homes inhabitable. And one of these places, one of these cities is called Midgar, that is built around the base of a Mako reactor. And Midgar is the home to Avalanche. Now, Avalanche is led by this eco-terrorist named Barret. Well, I don't want to call him an eco-terrorist. I like Barret. He's fighting for what he believes in. So it's led by a man named Barret.
We stand Barret.
Yeah, we stand Barret. Yeah, and Barret is joined by some other Avalanche members in the game, including Tifa, Jessie, Biggs, Wedge, and now our main character, Cloud. We're going to tell you more about Cloud and Barret later, since we're they're going to be part of our character analysis. But, one thing every one of them has in common is that they've been wronged by Shinra. They've had their families either killed by them, or they've had to move because Shinra destroyed their original town because of the Mako reactor. So at the start of the game and throughout this game, we follow a former soldier named Cloud, who is our main character, as he meets and joins Avalanche. He then assists them with these attacks on the Shinra Mako reactors, and eventually, these attacks escalate into bigger and bigger things. And spoiler number 2, they do eventually take down the Shinra HQ building and have an encounter with the president. It's a whole thing. We'll talk about it in more detail later. But this interaction kind of causes Sephiroth, who is this former war hero, to start following Avalanche, eventually trying to harm and stop them from what they're doing. Once again, not too sure what's going to happen with Sephiroth after this, but I guess we'll see in the next game, which is called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And yeah, actually, Joe, do you think you could tell us a bit about the gameplay, how it works, and maybe just a bit about how it is different from a more traditional JRPG game?
Sure, I could even refer to the original, because I did play the original.
Yeah.
So let's see. So this one, it's an RPG with active combat, right? Japanese RPG. So that means that you're in a predefined circle that you can't leave during combat. I think you can run. You can if you hit the limit of where you can go and just keep going, you can run away from the enemies. But you're attacking them in real time, so you're dodge rolling. You're blocking as well. It's a little bit more freeform, I'd say, compared to the original. The original is turn based, right? And you have a little meter that fills up when you can attack in the original, right? So you're waiting, right? This one you're not waiting. You're just attacking, right? You can do slashes, you can do punches, right? You can use magic. It's much more involved, very more like I said, freeform, and it's way different. Outside of combat, you explore the world and interact with people, solving side quests along the way. It's not really an open world. It's cut up into sections. So you're going from map to map, right? Going from city to city or location to location. More like it. Yeah, and that's a little bit about the gameplay for Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, because I did not play the original game, and I know you did pretty recently, and you played this remake pretty recently as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I played the original, started before COVID. During COVID, I dropped it. We were all going through the retro game phase, right? I was playing GameCube games and whatnot, right? Trying to collect some more GameCube games. So I dropped it for a little bit, took a couple years to come back to the original, finished it up, and then the remake dropped in 2020. I didn't play it till, I think 2024, right on the new year.
Yeah.
Finished it in a week. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. And you're right. This is 1/3 of the game of the original, right? This is taking place in Midgar, so that fight against the Whispers don't even exist in the original, right?
Yeah.
That final fight you have with Sephiroth in the remake, that doesn't even exist in the original.
Oh.
Yeah, it's wild. So to see the, what they're changing up, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see where they go with this. Yeah, go ahead.
No, me too. So do they what happens then instead of that fight with Sephiroth? Do they just there's nothing? They just go to the next area?
So you go to Shinra to go save Aerith, right? You meet Red 13, which is the dog, right? The wolf, cat, whatever, and then you just leave. I think you just leave, you just go out into the world and you're like, okay, here you go. Figure out what to do. So that fight with Sephiroth and the Whispers does not happen. And I think Sephiroth, I played it recently. I think Sephiroth is the one who destroys the Whispers at the end of that fight. He's like, I don't need this, right? Which is interesting because, and I was watching a video analysis from one of the YouTubers I usually watch. I think his name is Klemps. And he was saying, that means that now anything could happen, meaning that any character is on the chopping block, right?
Yeah.
So that's whoa, from the original, that's crazy. I wonder what they're going to do with this.
Yeah. No, that's insane. I love that. That idea just sounds unique and novel to me, and pretty enjoyable to just I don't know, take this thing, try to remake it, but tell your own unique story to it. Yeah, I really like this idea.
Yeah, I also heard a fan theory that or maybe it's not. Maybe this was actually confirmed. The Whispers kind of represent the fans and what they want, right? And so we're getting rid of the Whispers and the fans' input, right? And we're just doing our own thing now. Which, yeah, respect for that.
Yeah, gotta go for it. I mean, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah. So thank you for the background too. Now we're going to dive into our character discussion. And today we're going to be talking about the main character, Cloud Strife. We're also going to be talking about another character who doesn't show up too much in this game, but plays a vital role in Final Fantasy VII, named Zack Fair. and both of them are former soldiers, but Joe's going to tell us more about that in a bit. And I'm going to talk about Barret Wallace, who's the leader of Avalanche. And I'm also going to talk about Aerith Gainsborough, who is a mysterious woman. She doesn't really have, well, now she does have an affiliation with Avalanche, but at the start of the story, she didn't. And, I think with that being said, maybe we should just dive right into Cloud.
All right, let's do it. Yeah. So buckle up because there's a lot on Cloud, right? I mean, he's like
Yeah.
main character. So I got some history on him. Born August 11th, 1986, in the village of Nibelheim. Father died at an early age. We don't really get to see what his dad was like, what their relationship was like, right? But we do get to see that Cloud lived next to Tifa, which is a huge main character, right? But was shunned from her friend group. And according to, looking in the wiki and everything, Cloud developed a superiority complex, believing her friends were idiots because, he's just more mature and different from them. They don't like him because he's, this cool, tough guy.
Yeah.
He also had some, this issues with like, does Tifa like me? Does she dislike me? So at the age of 9, Tifa fell off Mount Nebel. I don't know what she was doing. Right, but she was out there, Cloud sees her, falling, tries to save her, fails to save Tifa. Tifa gets hurt. Cloud blames himself for not being strong. He wants to get stronger, to save the people he cares about. So Cloud wanted to better himself and acknowledge, we talked a little bit about Sephiroth. He acknowledged Sephiroth as a war hero, right? His exploits and triumphs, right? He's like, I want to be like, Sephiroth, right? I want to be a great soldier like him. So he wanted to join Soldier, which is like the military group for the Shinra company, right? They're the one that enforce laws, rules, and everything, right? They have like guards everywhere, carrying guns around and stuff. So he's hoping to become a soldier to kind of impress Tifa and be like, hey, I am a strong guy, right? I was doing this essentially for, to show off in a way, right? So at the age of 15, he joined the Shinra Electric Power Company in the hopes of making a soldier rank. However, he did not. So he was just an infantryman. So he was just a jobber, right? He didn't have the skills to make it to soldier. And so he was very ashamed about that. So he never contacted Tifa or anyone in Nibelheim because he was ashamed. However, Cloud does meet Zack, and we're going to get into a little bit of Crisis Core, right? Mr. Gongaga himself, Zack. And, they begin to, there's like this whole plot about, Genesis, which is like, this first class soldier, kind of like on the level of Sephiroth, right? This is like shooting into like Crisis Core. And I know a lot of people don't like this plot line, but, mentioning it, right? There's like a whole other plot going on. So they're trying to defeat Genesis, right? And all this stuff. So Cloud joins Zack and Sephiroth to investigate a damaged Mako reactor on Mount Nebel. This happens like later on in Crisis Core. This is where Sephiroth learns the truth of like, he's got Genova cells in him, right? His dad put Genova cells in him, when he was being, I guess, like in the womb. So he learns that truth and destroys Nibelheim. He's down there in the Nibelheim mansion, reading books and whatnot, the truth about what's going on. And this is kind of like the snapping point for Sephiroth, right? And so he starts to attack the party, Cloud, Zack. Cloud and Sephiroth have a brief fight, which is crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen I think the cutscene is in Remake, but when Cloud overpowers Sephiroth, when he's impaled, when Cloud like has a sword straight through him, and he like lifts Sephiroth and just chucks him, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
I was like, what? That makes it's crazy. And this guy's not a soldier. Cloud is not a soldier. How? How is he not?
Right.
Wild. But eventually, Cloud loses consciousness. I mean, he was impaled, and eventually he's collected by also Zack is unconscious as well because Sephiroth messed him up. They're collected by Professor Hojo, who's like one of the big bads, right? He's an evil scientist, right? Collects them, experiments on Cloud and Zack, for about I think 4 years. So what Hojo is doing is injecting them with Genova cells, which are like super cells that make like super soldiers, right? Like kind of like Sephiroth, who's this all powerful, guy, hoping that they'll turn him into Sephiroth clones, or so that Sephiroth can control them. However, Zack survives because he's a soldier, right? So he's already been like he's already dealt with all this stuff, right? He has the Genova cells, I believe. He's been experimented on before, so it doesn't do anything to him, right? However, Cloud gets Mako poisoning, right? Meaning, so he's like in the tube, right, where Hojo has him, and he's poisoned, so he's unconscious. So this is like Crisis Core, right? He's unconscious, so Zack is carrying him for like the next 9 months once they break out. So essentially, Zack is like carrying Cloud around, and yeah,
Whoa.
it's wild. Crisis
That's
Core is like
crazy.
and Crisis Core came after the original. Right?
Whoa.
It was on PSP, so there's a lot. There's a lot to cover. But with Cloud, that's a little bit of his background and who Zack is as well, which we're gonna get into that. So currently during the game, right, the remake and the OG, right, Cloud is 21 when the bombing mission occurs. You know how he's like on the train, he appears, right, he
Mm-hmm.
jumps off the train. We're gonna help Avalanche for a price, of course, right? He's a mercenary, so he
Yeah.
pretends not to care, or maybe he really doesn't care at the moment. He goes with Avalanche, does what he needs to for the money, right? So planting bombs at Mako reactors, and you explain what Mako was, the lifeblood, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and also in the remake, as you play as Cloud, you kind of see him experience like headaches, right, and visions of Sephiroth.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and also like I think there's a memory of him being impaled, right? That's like kind of like the post traumatic stress, right? It's kind of like he almost died.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't. Have you seen Sephiroth's like sword? The thing is like huge, right?
Crazy.
No idea how Cloud survived that. So eventually he meets up with, Tifa and Aerith, and the Final Fantasy VII plot, continues.
Yeah.
Right. So a little bit about his personality. He's stubborn, especially at the beginning. I don't know if you noticed, he's like closed off, reserved, dismissive. He doesn't care. He's in it for the money. And of course he's like edgy, right? He doesn't give a shit. I love that. I love that about him. And to see him open up over the time, over the point of the game, right? His interactions with
Yeah.
Aerith, he eventually opens up. Do you remember like the high five scene where like they're high fiving each other after like the robot arm stuff, and Cloud like actively like goes for a high five, but Aerith is like she doesn't know what's going on, right? Because Cloud is very closed off, and he's
Yeah.
embarrassed when she's all like she didn't like give him the high five. He's like, oh, never mind, that was nothing, right? And she's like, were you about to? And he's like, no, 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 don't worry about it,
No.
right? And so, like, with Aerith being playful, like, it kind of opens Cloud up.
Yeah.
And so you see him coming off from being stubborn and closed off, right? He starts to care, right? He still has like the I'll do this for a price kind of mentality, right? But you can tell he starts to care about, Barret, right? Tifa, even like Wedge, Big, Jesse. So there's a transition there, and
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy that. Do you have any thoughts on Cloud before I start the case study?
Yeah, no, I think that summarized it pretty well. I also love seeing like little hints of personality like leak out
Yeah.
eventually,
Yeah.
as you get to know him a bit better. Yeah, I talk about that as well with Barret, who's another he has a similar vibe where
Hmm.
his personality comes out as you get to know him, but his like initial personality is a bit more jarring than Cloud's. Cloud's is like you said, dismissive
He
and
doesn't care. He's
yeah,
stoic, right? But he
yeah,
cares. He cares. He
he
does.
does.
Yeah.
He does. I didn't know some of the background stuff that you described as well, so that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And we're gonna get into Zach as well, so I'll be covering a lot
Hmm.
of Crisis Core stuff. So, that'll be interesting, right? I love Zach. He's kind of like the opposite of Cloud because Zach is more like positive, upbeat. But we'll get to him.
Like Ichiban and Kiryu.
Oh, Ichiban and Kiri. Oh, we'll get to that at the end of the podcast. I can't wait to talk
Yeah,
about Like a Dragon with you.
yeah. So I don't know. Go ahead and I might not have described this at the top, but what we are going to do is like give the background information for the characters, which is what Joe just did for Cloud right
Mhm.
now, and then we're going to do a case study on them, or like a case study write up, which is like a kind of like a formal thing in like the psych world, or at least it was when
We were at
we were
school.
in grad school,
Yeah,
where you kind of aggregate all of their background information together to detail the attributes or characteristics of potential psych diagnoses or psychological disorders. So we're going to do that here with Cloud, or Joe's going to do that here with Cloud, and then we'll talk about some potential like diagnoses that Cloud might suffer from.
yeah. And just a heads up, we did this in the Persona podcast as well, but we're using a Western lens of psychology. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
Japanese game, right? And then Cloud, obviously a soldier, right? He's not going to be coming into a therapist office, or maybe he would. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Maybe after the end of the third Final Fantasy VII remake
Maybe.
game. Yeah.
Maybe, right? So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like, we're doing this for fun, right? Don't take it too seriously. Yeah, so just want to say that real quick, and let's jump into the case study for Cloud. So you're gonna hear a lot of the same info, right? But I have it, all aggregated, all put together here. So yeah, let's just get into it. So Cloud, is a 21-year-old soldier, according to him, from Nibelheim. Cloud appears stoic and silent. He discusses childhood, and reports a conflicted childhood. He acknowledged that he was very lonely, and he was very different from the other kids growing up in Nibelheim. Though he did have one friend by the name of Tifa who he had attempted to befriend. They had like some kind of history going on. Yet her friend group didn't approve of Cloud, shunned him. According to Cloud, there was a time where he attempted to save Tifa from falling off Mount Nebel. And at that time, Cloud was following her and was unsuccessful in saving her, and they both fell. Cloud noted that he wanted to get stronger, but was angry for himself because Tifa got hurt. So at the age of
Mm.
15, he joined Shinra in the hopes of becoming a soldier. That's his way of getting stronger, right? He had a purpose. I want to get stronger. I can do that if I join the military, right? Soldier, right? Which, is part of this Shinra company. And soldier is like the prestigious rank, right? That's like number one rank. That's what you want to go for, right?
Mm.
However, Cloud never becomes that. He's an infantryman, right? Which is noble still, right? But to him, it caused a lot of shame because his goal was to become a soldier. During his time as an infantryman, he met Sephiroth and Zack. And this was before Sephiroth went, insane, essentially, right? But, during the attack on Nibelheim, perpetrated by Sephiroth, Cloud witnessed the death of his mother in a fire, in Nibelheim, which again caused by Sephiroth. According to Cloud, he rushed to confront Sephiroth, and Sephiroth inflicted a grave wound and impaled Cloud. And Cloud was able to defend himself against Sephiroth, but was incapacitated. Cloud doesn't remember what happened after. However, he did detail the death of his friend Zack. Cloud describes intrusive thoughts pertaining to Sephiroth. Some of these thoughts resemble disassociative flashbacks, and Cloud swears that they're occurring in real time. So there are points in the game, right,
Mm.
where he thinks he sees Sephiroth, right, and he's like
Yeah.
in pain because of these headaches, right. And this is really just the Genova cells, I believe, right? So let's put that in the back burner, right? This is him in therapy, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So Cloud experiences a lot of anger and fear when confronted by these flashbacks. And he's known to detach from others. When he sees Sephiroth, right? Maybe Tifa and Barret are hanging out, right? But he just focuses on the flashback or what he's seeing in front of him, right? So everything else kind of melts to the wayside, like it just goes away, right? And he just sees Sephiroth. So he detaches himself from, everyone else and like even reality to a point. And Cloud encourage, this being a JRPG, a game, right? Of course, he's going to be engaging in reckless behavior, right? Fighting enemies, fighting soldiers, whatever, But I just wanted to say, there's a lot going on with Cloud, and
Yeah.
it seems like his concentration isn't the best, right? He's got a lot of like flashbacks, and it loses awareness a lot. So that kind of brings us to the diagnosis. And so let's get into post traumatic stress disorder. And I'm going to go through like what the DSM provides us with and the information it gives us. So like criteria A or criteria 1, right, for PTSD is exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following. So obviously he was stabbed, right?
Yeah.
He saw his mom die. He's directly experiencing these traumatic events. So we don't even have to go to the other criteria in criteria A. Like he already meets that. Let's go on to B, which is the presence of one or more of the following intrusion symptoms associated with the traumatic event, beginning after the traumatic event, right? So this is his like distressing memories of the traumatic event because he has a flashback where he gets impaled right by Sephiroth. Dissociative flashback reactions that he has, when he's like losing touch with reality and just sees Sephiroth, right? And like Sephiroth is confronting him and just like egging him on, basically like, come fight me, right? And that kind of stuff when it's not really happening.
Yeah.
And so that already meets criteria B, right? We just need two of those and he meets those. So for criteria C, there is persistence avoidance of stimuli associated with the traumatic events, beginning after the traumatic event occurred, as evidenced by one or both of the following. He meets avoidance because he's trying to avoid distressing memories, thoughts, or feelings about the associated traumatic event. He doesn't want to remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Genova cells, I would say, that are kind of like pushing these memories forward or these thoughts forward. So he's trying to avoid it because also like he has like these headaches, right? You see it in the game. He's like holding his head. He looks
Yeah.
like he's in pain. I don't want that. I would want to avoid that, right? And moving on to criteria D, negative alterations in cognition and mood associated with the traumatic event. So what this looks like is like, persistent negative emotional states, right? There's some fear, some horror, some anger, some guilt and shame in these flashbacks, right? Even like, he looks scared, or like he looks like he wants ready to fight, and also like I mentioned, he's got like feelings of detachment, right? He detaches in the moment when, those memories of Sephiroth come up or the flashbacks or, whatever's going on. So let's move on to criteria E, which is the marked alterations in arousal and reactivity associated with traumatic events, beginning or worsening after the traumatic event occurred. So what kind of behaviors are there, right? Reckless, of course, he's fighting enemies, right? He carries a big buster sword. It's a giant sword, right? He just destroys things with it. I mean, that's reckless, right? And obviously he has problems with concentration, right? Because he can be like, I don't know if there's a time where he's like in mid conversation and just like he gets hit by a flashback or something and it just like
Yeah.
all drops, right? It's like he's in that moment with Sephiroth or whatever's going on. And this is occurring after all the traumatic events, right? So criteria F is duration of the disturbance is more than 1 month, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, Cloud's been dealing with this for a while, way more than a month, So yeah, so I decided, hey, PTSD with a little bit of derealization, saying like what that means is essentially, reality is a little wonky for him. It's not accurate. So there's
Okay.
a little of that flavor into it, into the PTSD for Cloud. So again, this is just a case study. We're doing this for fun, right? This is what my thoughts are. The
Yeah.
PTSD. Yeah. I mean, any thoughts on you on your end over there?
Yeah. Um, no, I think it's funny because as we're only 2 episodes in, but it feels like PTSD is a reoccurring thing with a
Yeah.
lot of these characters. It feels like a lot of video games will develop the character, write the character to have like these traumatic moments in mind to
Hmm.
motivate them to do more. And I'm gonna be talking about PTSD again later on this episode. Yeah, one thing I wanted to just kind of touch on real quick as well, because you said the with derealization, and this is like something that I feel like maybe not too many people who are not in psychology will know about, is how like you can give a diagnosis like such as post-traumatic stress disorder, and then add like this modifier to it.
Hmm.
In this case, that's the derealization. So there's like some symptoms of something else that doesn't quite fit into that original diagnosis of, in this case, PTSD, that you can just add on to the diagnosis, so whoever is taking care of them can be aware of like this other symptom that they're
Right.
having.
Right. Keep it
And
in
yeah,
mind.
that was
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But no, yeah, it sounds like Cloud's got PTSD
Yeah.
for sure,
Definitely.
especially with the headache flashback thing.
So who's
I
next?
think I'll go ahead and talk about Barret. Speaking of PTSD, so some background on Barret, and a lot of the background for these characters also is not in the video game, so we had to
Yeah.
seek out resources elsewhere to learn about it. Thankfully, there's a wiki fan page on Final Fantasy VII that aggregated a lot of these people's backgrounds and everything, and that was like a huge lifesaver, at least for me when I was writing my
Oh
portion
yeah.
of this.
I can echo that. Yeah, that's where I got
Yeah,
most of my
so
info because these games are huge, right? And then like there's so much
yeah.
extra stuff out there, like books, other games, right? I think even movies or whatever.
Yeah. I know Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Like that's crazy. Have to go watch a movie to learn more about the character, but yeah. So with that being said, let me tell you about our leader of the eco terrorists here, Barret Wallace. So, Barret is a major character in Final Fantasy VII Remake. He's the leader of the eco terrorist group known as Avalanche, and like I said at the beginning, Avalanche's main goal is to prevent the Shinra Electric Power Company from using Mako, which is once again the energy life source of the planet. So, in this current moment, Barret is a 35-year-old male who lost his right arm during a tragic incident and now has a gun instead of his right arm. So, throughout the game, gameplay wise, mechanics wise, he's mostly using ranged attacks, but he can get some attachments onto his gun hand to make him a bit more for melee combat. But
Hmm. He's got like a
yeah,
wrecking ball or something like that. It's like a,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, Barret is also a large, muscular, and intimidating looking man who has tattoos and a metal band around his waist. And he also has 2 dog tags around his neck. Once again, that's what he currently looks like. So, a bit of his background story before the events of this game. He was born, or grew up at least, in his hometown called Corel. And he married a woman named Myrna. And she suffered from an undisclosed illness that we don't really know too much about. Because of his desperation to save his wife, he convinced his childhood friend, Dine, to cooperate with Shinra to build a Mako reactor north of their village. So this was kind of before Barret had these radical thoughts. So, some decades passed. Barret and Dine helped Avalanche. After this Mako reactor was built, some decades passed, and Barret and Dine eventually ran into Avalanche before they were a part of it. And they helped them in occupying the Shinra Mako reactor. And they believe they destroyed it. So then Shinra, or they did something to it, and Shinra retaliated by burning down Barret's hometown of Corel, which obviously caused chaos, killed many people, including his wife, Myrna. Barret and Dime then returned to the town because they were away while it was built. I think they were still occupying the Mako reactor. And when they returned, they were shot by Shinra agents who were trying to kill them. And unfortunately, Dine was killed and left behind a daughter. Her name is Marlene. And then Barret was severely injured, hence losing his right arm. Barret then rescued Marlene and vowed to take care of her as if she were his own, as a kind of like a dying wish from Dean, or just something to honor his friend's legacy. So Barret and Marlene, they stumbled on hard times and they wandered from town to town before eventually arriving in Midgar, which is now the home of Avalanche. And they met several members of Avalanche there, and they eventually joined the crew, and Barret worked his way up to the leadership position. So throughout this game, though, we meet Barret during the first attack at the very start of the game on this Mako reactor. This attack kind of goes unexpectedly well, draws the attention of Shinra, and then Barret kind of immediately is planning another attack. So they attack another reactor, and this one, it was kind of like set up like a trap. Where Shinra knew they were coming and they were trying to kill Avalanche live on air in front of everybody. But thankfully, Barret kind of inspires everyone. They fight through, and he eventually saves Cloud, who is hanging on the edge of this Mako reactor plate. These are huge towering structures that, I don't know, thousands of feet in the air. So if one of those plates fall, it will destroy anything underneath. And in this case, Midgar is right underneath there. So this is why they don't want to fully destroy the Mako reactor in this case, but they wanted to do some damage to it. They eventually, unfortunately, failed to prevent Shinra from detaching. I believe it was Shinra, right? That was they wanted to detach the plate.
Yeah, to destroy Section 7 or something like that, right? Yeah, because that's where Avalanche was.
Yeah, Avalanche was in Section 7 of Midgar. Yeah, so...
Well, at least this section. Because in the remake, they're like, oh, yeah, Barret's part of the Avalanche, right? But that's the radical part of Avalanche. In the original, Avalanche is just Barret and his team, right? In the remake, there's different divisions.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I didn't know. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because, yeah, Avalanche is a big eco-terrorist group that's spread across multiple towns and cities. And you don't even really know about them all or see them all. You just see Barret and his crew.
Right. They do come and help you during one fight, I think, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning of the game, of the remake, at least.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so, Shinra is trying to, take them down. So they drop a plate onto them. And, Barret once again fears that his kind of radical movements have cost some lives and killed people he swore to protect. Thankfully, I'm reading through this and realizing I just skipped through a bunch of plot stuff because it's big plot stuff, but it doesn't involve Barret. So I didn't write it down. But yeah. But yeah, eventually Aerith gets captured and sent to the Shinra building. So then Barret, Cloud, and Tifa go and try to break her out and rescue her. And there, we kind of hear a quote from Barret about how these people are not without sin and must accept their complicity if they were to blow up the Shinra building here, which is kind of Barret's goal right now, is just to destroy everything. So, they later free Aerith, thankfully, and another new character who you mentioned already named Red 13,
right.
From a research lab that was at the, kind of within the Shinra building. They kind of stumble their way up. They're escaping and they stumble their way up the building, eventually getting to Shinra's president. And the president's dangling from a ledge. Of course, Barret sees this. He wants to kill him. But Tifa and Aerith, convince them to spare the president. So Barret kind of becomes a better person now. Not sure exactly what he was thinking at this point, but Barret spares the president under the condition that the president admits that Shinra was behind the destroyed Sector 7 plate that fell onto Midgar, and not Avalanche. The president, of course, doesn't like this, so grabs a gun, threatens to shoot Barret, but then Sephiroth appears, kills the president, and kills Barret. But the Whispers come in. This is interesting because this is one of the few times they don't try to fight off the Whispers, but the Whispers come and heal Barret.
Right.
Heal his wounds.
To die.
It
Right.
wasn't his time to die. His death was not supposed to happen now in the plot, so they let it happen and Barret's revived. But then Barret later helps Cloud fight off the Whispers and Sephiroth, but then Sephiroth eventually escapes. But I think after taking down Shinra, Barret then vows to continue to fight Sephiroth because an enemy of the planet is an enemy of his. A little bit about like Barret's personality. You know, he has this giant personality, intimidating presence, but that kind of shies away once you get to know him. You know, this was pretty apparent when we first meet Cloud. You know, he doesn't trust Cloud. He just kind of speaks to him in a cold manner, sees him as just another person, a mercenary who just wants the money, so he doesn't really consider him like a person. But eventually, you know, he warms up to Cloud. We see moments in which he actually like enjoys speaking to Cloud and is happy of their friendship.
They become besties later on. Right?
Yeah, I know.
Like friends.
They become best friends. A lot of his like personality, a lot of this sense of justice of his is fueled by his destruction of his home, which he has now twice witnessed. You know, we saw Shinra burn down Corel. We saw Shinra crush Midgar. So obviously he has this resentment towards them and wants to destroy them at all costs. But you know that these might be some like negative traits of his, but he's also a very passionate and emotional person, definitely towards the protection of the planet. According to this wiki, he has a background on planetology, and he knows the history of the ancients, which are like, I guess, the people who created this world. So he, prior to all of this Shinra stuff, you know, was already passionate about protecting the planet. So it makes sense now that he sees Shinra destroying the planet. He obviously sees them as his enemy. I think he also carries a bit of resentment around with him because he helped Shinra start up this base in Corel, which ultimately led to his destruction. He wasn't sure of how like this was going to play out. He was so desperate to save his wife that he was willing to do anything, and didn't realize that what he was doing was bringing in like this evil into his home that would eventually lead to its destruction. So he carries that burden with him, and I think that fuels a lot of what he does and his motivations in this game, and at least to me made a pretty interesting character. And I low-key love Barret, so I'm glad I was able to do a little deep dive on him. But yeah, I was going to go ahead and talk about the case study. But Joe, is there anything I don't know. I felt like I talked a lot about his background here.
I know in the original, I think Dine is still alive or something like that. I'm not too sure. Or maybe not again.
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense. When I was reading about his on the wiki, it said seemingly dies. And I was like, okay, I'll leave it at that then. I don't want to in case Dine comes up later, like I didn't want to spoil it for myself, but it's okay.
Right. I mean, spoiler warning,
yeah.
right?
I know.
We'll see what the remake does. I'm interested to see what they change, right? Now that the Whispers are gone, so now that OG Final Fantasy 7 isn't canon in remake or whatever,
yeah,
we'll see what they do. But yeah, no, Barret's a really interesting character. Really, at first I was like, I don't like how he's treating my boy Cloud, right? But then
yeah,
it opens up, right? He's a really cool dude. Cares about his daughter, right? He's a great guy.
Does everything for Marlene. He's got a heart of gold. He's got a very loud, passionate heart. And sometimes, he has to be overly protective with it. And that's why he comes across as like this powerful man who tries to intimidate people. And I get it. So with that being said, once again, we'll do a case study here. Cool. Now for the case study for Barret. Barret is a 35-year-old male who is the leader of Avalanche, which is an eco-terrorist organization whose goal is to take down Shinra. When he was younger, Barret took care of his wife, Myrna, who suffered from an illness. While seeking assistance for his wife's health, he helped Shinra move into his hometown of Corel, a decision he later regretted and tried to reverse by taking down the Shinra Mako reactor. This led to angering Shinra, which resulted in Shinra burning down Corel and shooting Barret and Barret's friend, Dine. Barret lost his right arm as a result, and he took in Dine's daughter, Marlene, as his own. Barret and Marlene then suffered from homelessness as they traveled from town to town, eventually moving into Midgar, which is a town made at the base of a Shinra Mako reactor. There, Barret joined Avalanche and worked his way up to the leader position after many years. As leader of Avalanche, Barret planned and executed several attacks on Shinra's facilities, including Mako reactors and Shinra's base of operations. Barret's eco-terrorist activities caused damage and potentially death to Shinra's employees and others who were associated with Shinra. Barret views these killings as an unfortunate consequence of liberating the planet from Shinra's evil. He had the opportunity to kill the president of Shinra, but ultimately spared his life after being convinced by his peers. Now Barret will continue his fight, in this time against Sephiroth, and defend the people of Avalanche. So much like Cloud, after reading this background, it seemed to me that Barret also suffered from a post-traumatic stress disorder, and his symptoms manifested themselves in different ways than Cloud, slightly different. For the first criterion, which is an exposure to trauma, we saw Barret have a traumatic event occur to him, which alone would be enough to move on to criteria B, but we also see it occur to someone close to him, literally in front of his face, in his presence as well, which was like the death of his friend dying. For criteria B, we also see a presence of intrusive symptoms, and this one might be a bit of a stretch, but seems like he might experience prolonged psychological distress and exposed to anything related to Shinra. It kind of seems like he just not really shuts down, but like he gets angry. You could tell that it causes him a lot of hurt. Yeah, it's like a triggering word for him. So he tries to, he doesn't necessarily avoid talking about Shinra, but you can tell that there is something there that has kind of influenced his behavior in this way. We also see for the next criteria, avoidance of stimuli. And also another bit of a stretch, but might assume he avoids talking about the situation. Like, for example, I didn't know about any of this stuff until I went through the wiki about his home burning down and his wife dying. He definitely doesn't talk about that in the game.
Remake. Right, that's OG info.
Yeah. So this is all information that he is kind of held, he doesn't want to share, and I think he avoids talking about it because it's a traumatic event for him, very painful event. For the next criteria, negative alterations in cognitions and mood. We see him blaming himself for allowing Shinra to come into Corel and the resulting destruction. So there's a lot of guilt there. But then we also see a kind of persistent negative emotional state of anger at seemingly anyone related to Shinra, or kind of just anyone he doesn't trust. Like we already said, he has this shell up, his walls up at all the time now, because he doesn't trust anyone. He's afraid of what that trust might bring. So a lot of these characters have to earn Barret's trust and ease into him. For the next criteria, like marked alterations in reactivity due to the traumatic event. Here we see reckless and destructive behavior against Shinra. We see him behaving differently, and one of those ways is through this reckless and destructive behavior. And we also see hypervigilance, like in his desire to destroy Shinra. It seems like with like hypervigilance, we could see him, I don't know, just kind of taking the stand. I mean, like he's an eco-terrorist, and he's like trying to defend his people, and he is attacking them, and to me that seemed like a sign of hypervigilance by like attacking the people that have hurt him previously, but maybe that could just be my own take on that word. I think all of these criteria together, and I think the final criteria, we see these symptoms persist for longer than 1 month. With that, this has happened years ago, and a lot of these personality traits that he has gained since this traumatic event, they're still with him, they still occur. He is still just like a very angry and kind of destructive person. Putting that all together, it seems like he suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. But one kind of interesting thing that wasn't a disorder that I wanted to bring into this discussion was I looked up studies because I was curious. I'm like, is there any sort of connection between a quote-unquote eco-terrorist and any psychological disorders? And according to some study, it was a peer-reviewed study. It wasn't just like some random article. There seems to be an association between depressive symptoms and sympathy for violent protesters and terrorism. There's also another study that finds a significant association between antisocial personality disorder and extremist opinions. But according to this literature review, these studies should be taken with a grain of salt because they might have a poor methodological quality. But I found it interesting that there is, especially this antisocial personality disorder and extremist opinions. I feel like with antisocial personality disorder, you see people, it's kind of in its name, antisocial. They kind of don't, or in layman's terms, they kind of just don't care about other people. You kind of seems to be what Barret has at times when he's just like willing to blow up a building and not caring who's in there.
He doesn't care for the consequences.
Yeah, so that's Barret Wallace. That's our good old buddy Barret. Great leader. By the end of this game, we see his walls come down, and we see the person that he actually is, which is just someone with a huge heart. Yeah, he's kind of scary when you first meet him. I do love him. Like he's one of my favorite characters. But I'm curious to know more about this Zack guy who I've heard a lot about, but since I haven't played the OG games, don't really know too much.
Okay. Yeah, so let's get into Zack. So instead of and just a heads up, instead of doing a case study for Zack, there's not too much info, right? So, we're gonna talk a little bit about the culture of military, like military culture essentially, right? Because
Okay.
Cloud and Zack are both military. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Zack. He was born in 1984 in Gongaga. That's why he call there's a line in Crisis Core where he goes, "Me, Gongaga," right? And I think that's like the funniest
Huh.
thing ever because it's such a funny sounding like name for a town,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's why I call him Mr. Gongaga,
Gaga.
right?
I know you
I,
said it earlier, and I thought that was like an anime
no,
trope or something.
yeah, I figured you'd be lost, so I'm like, you know what? Let me explain it, right? So he was born in 1984. He left for Midgar at the age of 13 and joined Shinra. Not too much about his past or like childhood. We're going into Crisis Core territory, which is like a game on the PSP. Now it's on modern consoles. So Zack trained under someone called Angeal, which was like his mentor in Soldier. So when we meet Zack, he's like a soldier second class. Eventually, get the promotion to first class. Has to wipe out a whole enemy base, prove that he deserves the promotion. And there's a lot of shenanigans with, again, I think I mentioned Genesis earlier, which is like kind of like another soldier, powered up soldier. So Genesis goes bad, right? And so Zack starts to work with Sephiroth and Angeal. Eventually, Angeal like kind of disappears. He's kind of gone. So Sephiroth helps out Zack to look for him. They find Angeal, again, his mentor. Something about monsters attacking, right? And Angeal believes he himself is a monster because you know how Sephiroth has the one wing?
Oh yeah.
Angeal has it as well. And so does Genesis. But when Angeal sees it, when he's like, I have the one wing, he believes he's a monster. So eventually, Crisis Core happens. Zack meets Aerith and they have a budding relationship. They start dating eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, again, Crisis Core happens, right? Angeal becomes a monster actually, like weird dog hybrid type wolf animal thing that Zack has to fight. And that actually is Angeal. And so Zack has to defeat him, meaning that, he kills his own mentor. Actually, so the Buster Sword, the giant sword that Cloud carries around,
Yeah.
that's actually Angeal's sword.
Oh.
Yeah, so the mentor for Zack, that's his sword. He passes it on to Zack, and Zack passes it on to Cloud. It's like, don't let your dreams die out, right? It's symbolic.
Mm.
So when Angeal dies, he gives it to Zack. When Zack dies, he gives it to Cloud. So eventually Zack meets Cloud on like a mission, right? They get along. Nibelheim occurs, which, Sephiroth goes insane, learns the truth, destroys
Yeah.
Nibelheim. Zack is captured by Hojo again. So there's a lot of stuff, that we covered. He's experimented on. Eventually, Zack does break out and rescues Cloud. Crisis Core happens again, and they fight Genesis, which is, again, some dude we don't really care about. I know the fan base doesn't really like him either.
Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis, yeah. And
Okay.
I'm like, okay. Sure, and I played this game like a long time ago on PSP, so I had to go into the wiki to like remember, watch some video analysis and stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is
Yeah.
making sense again. So eventually, Zack learns that he was captured for 4 years by Hojo, and the reason he knows this is that he receives letters from Aerith. I think one of the what are they called? The guys in the black suit, like the fancy suits. Um, what are their names? Because they do wear the Turks. There we go, the Turks. That's what they're called.
Oh
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So there's this guy named Song, right, in Crisis Core, and eventually he hands this stack of letters to Zack. Like it's Aerith sending letters for the past 4 years,
Oh yeah.
right? And so Zack's like, "Oh crap, we were gone for 4 years. We were captured for 4 years. Time to go to Midgar." And so, he's carrying Cloud. He's unconscious, right, because of the Mako poisoning from the experiments. So he's protecting Cloud, right? He's fighting his way through a lot of soldiers. Eventually, we hit Zack's final stand, which is like right in front of Midgar, like right outside of Midgar. It's still in the open world,
Mm.
right? It's still the world map essentially, where it's just all of Shinra against Zack. This one guy, yeah, he's a soldier, he's really powerful, but it's like hundreds and hundreds of like infantrymen, helicopters, grenadiers, and all this stuff, right? So in Crisis Core,
Mm.
this is Zack's final stand. Like he's gone. Like he's killed by 3 soldiers essentially because he fought through so many of them. He's exhausted. And
Yeah.
so he dies, and eventually Cloud wakes up from the poisoning and he's like, what happened? What happened? And Zack, still alive, passes the sword to him and then dies. But of course, in the remake, at the final part, we see that Zack made it through his final
Yeah.
stand, which I was like, what? I don't think I was spoiled on that, because I recently played the remake. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa. And I was like, what
Oh,
are they gonna do with this? Right? Like, what are they gonna
yeah.
change? Yeah, so that's a little bit about Zach. So his personality, he's upbeat, optimistic, enthusiastic. He's restless. He's referred to as Zach the puppy by his mentor, right? Because he's just full of energy. He just wants to get
Mm,
going, easygoing. He's all over the place. But eventually, after of course his mentor dies, things happening in Crisis Core, he kind of matures, right? He's still upbeat and optimistic, but he kind of calms down, right? He
mm,
has a more like clear head and more mature, and he ends up caring for Cloud for like 9 months. Cloud is unconscious. He's like dragging him, making sure he's okay, protecting him. Zach is a good guy. He really is. Love that
yeah.
character. He's like the opposite of Cloud, right? Because Cloud's more closed
Yeah,
off,
it
right?
seems like it.
Very
Yeah.
very stoic, right? But Zach, no, he's not. I love both Cloud and Zach. They're really cool. Honestly.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on your end?
I wasn't sure of when Crisis Core happens in the timeline.
Hmm.
Like that's before the
This is
events of Final
before.
Fantasy
Yeah.
VII, right?
This is like right
Okay.
before. Yeah, right before Cloud shows up on his, his epic stance on the train when he does a front flip or whatever.
Yeah.
This is like right before. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it takes like over, a couple years, right? But when Crisis Core ends, it's like right before Final Fantasy VII picks up.
Oh, got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know much about Zack, and my first interaction with him was seeing him in that cutscene in Final Fantasy VII Remake. So that part didn't hit me quite as much as I think it hit you since you knew his
Yeah.
fate. Yeah, once again, really interesting to see what they're going to do with now that we're at this point where it's clear that it is deviated from the original game.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. He's alive. He's gonna go meet Aerith. Like, what does this mean? I think it's gonna be a
Yeah.
good time. Not gonna lie.
And he was higher up in the ranking, like because you said he was a soldier
Yeah,
as
so he
well.
was first class, I believe.
Okay, so he was like a better soldier than Cloud at this
Right. I
point.
mean, Cloud never made Soldier.
Yeah, he never even made soldier rank. I'm interested to see what you found between like some of the research because we're not doing a case study for Zack.
Correct. Yeah, so yeah, let me get into it. So, just that some info on the culture of the military. This is like a textbook we had to read back in grad school in one of the marriage family therapist classes, giving
Mm,
counseling out to military folk. And I work with military folk. I work with veterans as well. So I was like,
mhm,
you know what, this might be a little bit interesting. Let me go back into this textbook, see what I can pull out. So essentially, they're talking about, the culture of the military, warrior society. It's an authoritarian structure, right? It's strict and obedient. They will tell you what to do, and they will break you, and they will make you. That's
mhm.
the military. You don't have any freedom in the military. You are supposed to get up at a certain time, eat at a certain time, go to sleep at a certain time, right? There's some leeway here and there, especially I think to rank. Yeah, it's very like authoritarian. And so it's interesting because we see Zach and Cloud kind of come from like backgrounds where, they were just kids, right? Things were happening. It sounds like they both didn't have much structure in their life. And, Shinra as a military company is going to provide that structure. So I kind of wish we would see a little bit more about Cloud and Zach in their childhood to see, what's the correlation here? What's the connections we can make, right? But it's interesting that both of these guys, were like, hey, the military, right? They got into
Mhm.
a structured warrior society. In the military, rank structure affects families, creates distance, not just between the military, but the civilian world itself. So like throughout the game, throughout remake, you'll see Cloud referring to things like, he's a military guy, tries not to get close to people, right? Keeps his distance because he knows that, hey, at any time anyone can just die, right? Especially with what they're doing, attacking the Mako reactors, fighting enemies, fighting Shinra, which is like the whole military. So don't get too close. In the military, there's a commitment to it. Typically a commitment to one's unit and the mission and its members. So there's a part in Crisis Core where he's like storming an enemy base. The Wu Tai. I don't know if you're familiar with the Wu Tai. They're mentioned here and there in remake.
Yeah, just barely.
And the Wutai are like, hey, you're working for Shinra. They're the bad guys. Like, they're terrible. Why are you doing this? Why are you wiping this out, right? Zack doesn't question it because he has loyalty. He was fed this information like, hey, what you're doing is noble, which you should be proud of it. Don't question it.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like the message of the military as well. And I'm not trying to like cast aspersions on the U.S. military or whatever, right? But it's like they're sold this message, right? And not everyone believes it, but Zach certainly believed it, right? What he was doing was right.
Hmm.
It was a mission. Don't question it. Service members are often required to spend long hours on the job and are part of a tight team, almost like a second family, right? So this is Zack's relationship to Angel, his mentor. Like they get really close, right? They're more than friends, right? That's his mentor. It looks like they're family at points in Crisis Core. Of course, and then we're hitting the concept of honor in the military. What does honor mean? So there's a part in Crisis Core where Angel shares his perspective on what honor is and how to protect honor, and it's like the most important thing. And he passes it on to Zack, and Zack carries that message as well. There's a part in Crisis Core where he's like telling his fellow soldiers like to always protect your soldier honor, protect your comrades. This is a message like, again, military, they're going to give you this, right? Protect those guys that your comrades, protect them at all costs, right? It's interesting because when you see Cloud open up and get closer to Barret, Aerith, Tifa, right? Again, Cloud is a military guy and he'll do anything to protect them, right? You see that growing in Remake. The concept of honor comes into the picture because to inflict suffering on an adversary, a warrior must not identify with the adversary or feel remorse for the suffering of the adversary. So this kind of goes into a little bit of, with Cloud, right? I mean, and even Zack, they're fighting their fellow soldiers, but they have a belief and they're upkeeping that belief, upkeeping that honor as well. And, even though Barret isn't part of a military group, right? He protects his own
He's
group
pretty
as well.
militant.
Yeah, militant, right? So that even applies to Barret as well. So one thing I want to talk about in the military is the use of shame, and this goes into Cloud because Cloud joined the military, because he was ashamed of how weak he was. He wasn't strong enough to save Tifa, right? So that shame was like his driving force. And then when he couldn't make it as a soldier, what did he do with that shame? He kind of hid it and was like he never contacted Tifa or anyone in Nibelheim. I think his mom knows, but that's the only person that knows because he was so ashamed that I was going to become a soldier, but he never did. So there's some shame in there. And shame is used very effectively in real world military, right? It's like if you can't do this, then you're that, right? They just
Mm,
talk complete trash to them, right? Shame is very
yeah.
powerful, especially in the military. I even have a quote from the book here that says, avoid shame at all costs. We're supposed to wear a mask of coolness to act as though everything is going all right and that everything is under control, even if it's not. So this is the textbook saying this. This is kind of the
Yeah.
message. And then I have another thing from the book that we're talking about, Counseling Military Families, I think the book is called, who outlines the characteristics of the warrior psyche. This includes a heroic stance, willpower to act in danger, action, heightened awareness that comes in living in the presence of death, identification of action with force, a paranoid worldview, black and white thinking, repression of fear, compassion and guilt, an obsession with rank and hierarchy, right? You can see all of this, especially with Cloud. Repression of fear, compassion, right? He doesn't want to get close to anyone. His action, what are his actions? He carries around a sword and just destroys everything, right? He has an awareness of the presence of death, right? Because he's experienced it. He lost his mom. Tifa got hurt. So there's like a lot of these things on with Cloud. Obviously, he's heroic as well. Cloud is in a heroic stance. And of course, Cloud's obsession with rank, right? To make it to first class soldier.
Yeah.
And then the final part here, which I find interesting with the list of characteristics of the warrior psyche, is the degrading of the feminine. I don't really agree with that, but there's that part where Cloud, we dress him up. So that's like an interesting point to make.
Oh,
My
yeah.
soldier guy, he's not supposed to do that, but he does. He breaks that
Yeah.
conventional norm of the warrior society, and I just think that's cool.
Yeah, for anyone who's not too familiar with this, this is both in the original and the remake game.
Hmm.
There's a part where Cloud has to dress up in a dress or just like in a typically female identifying outfit, to try to impress this like kind of mob leader
Mobster guy,
type
yeah,
fool, yeah,
yeah.
and to be a suitor, possibly like wife suitor.
To
So
save Tifa, right?
to save Tifa. Yeah. So I love how like Cloud wasn't able to save her like before, but then this is his way of saving her
Yeah.
now is to like dress up and like use that to infiltrate the base to save her. Like it was cool.
Yeah. So I like that, that they break up that conventional norm of, what a warrior society looks like, And again, this is like a textbook from 2008. And then, so this is
Hmm.
outdated, right? I don't know if degrading the feminine
Sure.
in the military is still a thing. It might be. I just find that
Yeah.
interesting. Cloud goes through that and he doesn't care. He's a little embarrassed at first, especially because Aerith is always like taking shots at him, right? Essentially, just
Yeah, they have
joking
a
on
very
him.
playful relationship.
Yeah, it's playful, but Cloud will do what's necessary to protect those people that he cares about, right?
Hmm.
I just think that's cool. So yeah, so this is a little bit about the military, kind of the culture of the military. What does Zack and Cloud see in Shinra Power Company?
Yeah.
I mean, honor, right? I mean, you're gonna get stronger. Just wanted to share with you guys a little bit of about that. Any thoughts on it?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you did this, especially since there's probably not like enough for a full-on case study for like Zach. So yeah, this was interesting just to see some like military and psychology concepts because military is a pretty big theme in this game, at least for the backgrounds of our main characters
All
here.
right.
So yeah, no, thank you. But yeah, like you said, Zach, Aerith, they got a history. So I need to tell you a bit about Aerith's history, unless there's something else you had for Zach.
No, I felt like I talked a lot about Zach. I just know that these characters, I really love these characters. They're really cool guys. But no, take it away with Aerith.
Cool. Thank you. This is going to be our last character here, Aerith Gainsborough. She is kind of a very whimsical, friendly, bubbly person. At the start of the game, she's a 22-year-old woman, and she is actually half human and half of this other race called Cetra. And the Cetra are an ancient race that are granted powerful magic abilities, and Aerith is actually going to be the last of the Cetra because they were all hunted or killed out or something.
Or extinct or whatever the reason was, right?
I'd imagine that they were probably hunted because of their magical abilities, so people probably saw them as a threat or wanted to use them. Just making assumptions there, though. So before the events of Final Fantasy VII, we have Aerith, and she lived with her father and mother, but the father, his name was Gast, and he was killed by Professor Hojo, who we talked about earlier. He ran Shinra's research, and he comes up multiple times in the Final Fantasy VII story. So after Hojo killed Aerith's father, Hojo went on to capture Aerith and her mother, who is the pureblood Cetra person named Ifalna.
Ifalna, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So we have Aerith and Ifalna were captured by Hojo. So Aerith and her mom were the subject to numerous experiments that were done by Shinra, by Hojo, as they sought to like understand and harness the magic inside of their blood. So because of this, Aerith witnessed like a lot of tests that were done on Ifalna, and she saw these become like more and more intense, eventually resulting in painkillers that needed to be injected into the mom just to get through some of these tests. Fortunately for them, a scientist in the lab by the name of Faz Hicks helped Aerith and her mother escape, but her mom collapsed during the escape and died. So unfortunately, Aerith, was seeking help and then ran into Elmira, I believe her name is pronounced, Elmira Gainsborough, who went on to adopt Aerith and took her into her own home. So Aerith eventually went on to live with the Gainsborough house, and Shinra did end up finding Aerith in this town that they were at, and then made a deal with Aerith's new mom, Elmira. And Elmira said that she would let them know if Aerith reveals the location of the promised land, which is what Shinra was really looking for. This promised land is a location that supposedly has like a large amount of Mako, right. So Shinra wants to use that for themselves. And they believe that Aerith, because she's the last of the Citra, or maybe I'm saying that wrong. Is it Citra? Cetra?
Yeah.
Because she's the last of the Cetra, will somehow know this location. So because of this deal between Elmira and Shinra, Elmira became pretty restrictive with Aerith, only allowed her to visit certain places, not watch TV due to her of being informed of like the events that are happening in the quote-unquote outside world, meaning like outside of this town, outside this village. But of course, Aerith, kind of snuck around, tried to make sure she wasn't caught, and would visit random places throughout town. And she eventually met Zack when Zack fell into a church that Aerith would often visit near Mako Reactor 5.
Similar to Cloud.
And this is interesting. What?
Similar to Cloud, right? That's
yeah. Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, this is pretty much where Cloud, kind of how Cloud met Aerith as well. But yeah, for Aerith and Zack, it's funny because you said they dated, but on the wiki, it said that they never officially got to date. I guess there is some distinction that they made of like oh, because they weren't boyfriend, girlfriend, then they didn't date, even though they were hanging out all the
Mhm.
time. Like, I don't know. This is probably just some weird semantic thing or
It
like
might be, yeah, because I
however people
remember
define relationships.
Crisis Core had a mission where I think you're like selling flowers with her, or you're out in the town or something like that. As Zack, am I remembering that
It's
wrong? I don't know. Yeah.
no, I think you're probably remembering it correctly because my take on it was that they were totally dating, but they were never like officially boyfriend or girlfriend because Zack eventually had got shipped off to fight in the army. But yeah, so that's kind of what happens before we even meet Aerith. But now in the Final Fantasy VII remake, we first see her on the streets of Sector 8 and Cloud spots her being attacked by whispers. So Cloud kind of attracts the attention of these local guards accidentally because he draws his sword. He wants to defend Aerith against the whispers. Then that doesn't go so well, so they end up just running away separately to get away from the guards. But then we see Aerith again when Cloud stumbles in through the roof of the church that she often frequents, just like Zack. But there, this time, we see a Shinra agent named Sang who tries to take her in. This time, Aerith and Cloud, well, Cloud eventually defends Aerith from being taken in, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they get to know each other a bit better. They explore the Sector 5 slums, but Elmira does tell Cloud to like sneak out and never speak to Aerith again because she doesn't want Aerith to be endangered or whatever. She's being like a very protective mother. But Aerith does confess to Cloud that he reminds her of her first love, aka Zack. So she does go with him to Sector 7. And there we see this sequence of where they visit this like wall market, which is like this illegal entertainment district. There they're trying to rescue Tifa by infiltrating Don Corneo's ceremony of finding a bride. And then it's fun because Tifa and later Cloud dress up to pose as possible suitors because they were really trying to get close to Don Corneo.
Mm-hmm.
But they eventually do confront Corneo. This is where we first learn of Shinra's plan to drop the plate onto Sector 7. And yeah, so they eventually just like return to Sector 7, but they already find it under attack by the time they get back. So Aerith at this point volunteers to go to the bar to help people evacuate there. But she was ultimately caught again by Shinra's agent, Sang. And this time, she doesn't want any trouble, so she does willingly go back with him to Professor Hojo's laboratory so that they could continue running experiments. And that's why we later see Cloud, Tifa, and Barret like having to break in to the research lab to rescue Aerith again. And this time they rescue her. I kind of already described it before of like how the whispers do interrupt, but eventually they defeat them. And then we kind of just see him continue out to Midgar. I kind of yada at the end of of her story because it feels like we already spoke about it a couple times. But yeah, it's same thing with like Barret and the president of Shinra and Sephiroth appearing and all that.
A lot of crossover.
Yeah, a lot. Because yeah, these characters are constantly like hanging out with each other and they interact and they're going on missions together. So of course they're gonna encounter some of the same stuff. But yeah, a bit about her personality. It's interesting because despite her traumatic upbringing, she has a rather like bubbly, joyful, and compassionate personality. She's just exuding this positivity and confidence, and she like tries to inspire others to just continue and fight on when things are looking bleak. And she also has a rather optimistic outlook on life, which totally defies all the trauma that she went through. And she's pretty quick to make friends because of her extroversion. She has the desire to see good in people, and this ties in with her positive, optimistic outlook on life. But you could also tell that probably because she was brought up in captivity, she really enjoys her freedom. So when her mom, her adopted mom Elmira, was trying to restrict her and keep her in again, she finds ways to sneak out and like just go and continue to be free, even though like the authority figures tell her no. So I think that kind of sums up her story in the game. So I also don't have a official diagnosis for her because she didn't really meet a lot of the requirements for them, but I was still going to talk about it. Yeah, with her case study, unless there was something else you wanted to say about Aerith.
No, we just know that, in the original, she dies, right? I think you're aware of that, right?
Would you just? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
What? 25-year-old spoiler? Or I don't know, 1990, whatever.
Yeah, 97. No, it says 27-year-old spoiler almost. That's crazy. Yeah, no, it's funny because this is like the one thing I knew before I even played this game. That was the one thing I knew was that, oh yeah, Aerith dies. But I forget in Final Fantasy 7 Remake, have we hit that point where she would die yet? And we passed it? No, we haven't gotten
No,
there
we
yet.
have not.
Okay. So we're gonna see what Rebirth does, which is the sequel to
Yeah,
Final
we're gonna
Fantasy
see
7
what
Remake.
happens, which right because now the whispers are supposedly gone.
Yeah.
So, and also I don't know if like the game alludes to like Aerith knowing what's going on or what can happen because she alludes to things that are like she knows more than she
Yeah.
than she leads on or whatever. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point.
what's gonna happen?
I don't know. I actually did read about that. I didn't write it down, but yeah, it does seem like she has some sort of ability, kind of like Zack and his headaches, to see. Like, I guess Zack's headaches are more PTSD like, whereas Aerith's is more like seeing the original timeline, or like she knows
Right.
something about the original timeline and how it happens. They haven't made that clear yet, so we're just kind of speculating on how they're going to do that. For her official case study, Aerith is a 22-year-old woman who is half human and half Citra. This grants her magic abilities and attunes her to the planet and the energy surrounding it. When she was a child, Aerith was held captive at a young age, along with her mother, and experimented on due to her Citra blood. Aerith and her mom eventually escaped with the help of a sympathetic researcher, but her mom dies during this escape. Aerith was quickly found by another woman, Elmira, who adopted her and became her new mother. Growing up in Midgar, Aerith was restricted by her new mother and on what she was allowed to do and where she could go. This caused Aerith to sneak around wherever she could. Aerith eventually found a soldier named Zack and fell in love with him as they explored together. Zack was deployed out and left Aerith behind. Years later, Aerith eventually met Cloud on the streets of Sector 8. She later reunited with Cloud in a church she often visits, where Cloud saved her from capture. Aerith eventually meets up with the eco-terrorist group Avalanche and joins their cause in their fight against Shinra and saving the planet. Aerith also is captured again by Shinra, but is promptly freed by Avalanche when they attack Shinra's building. Aerith joins Barret, Cloud, and Tifa in defeating the Whispers and leaves Midgar towards another adventure. So, now you're caught up. For her case profile, and like I said, she didn't really meet a lot of the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, even though that is what I kind of initially put down. She did have crazy exposure to trauma, being experimented on, held captive, and witnessing her mother going through the same things and even dying in front of her.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it ends in terms of PTSD. As I was going through the criteria and like reading everything there, I'm like, I don't think she meets like any of these things. She's like pretty well adjusted given her crazy traumatic background, and like she's not showing like presence of intrusive symptoms. She's not avoiding the stimuli really. I mean, maybe a bit, because sometimes she just won't. I don't know if she really opened up about her history with Cloud like during that time. I don't really remember that happening.
There was that
Too
part
much.
where I think we see like a little bit of a I don't know if it's bullying going on, but it's in the train yard, the ghost yard, right? Where she has like a
Oh, right.
flashback of like the kids not finding her or like hide and seek or something like that or not playing with
That's
her.
right.
But she's really high functioning and like well adjusted, right?
Yeah,
So I can see, yeah,
I
there's no
agree.
need for
Yeah.
a diagnosis, right?
Mm-mm. So I guess I wanted to bring that up because this is like a perfect example of how some people will go through trauma, but then come out like not everyone is going to have a disorder or like process that trauma the same. So I mean, I know these are fictional characters and all, but we see Aerith here who goes through similar things of family members dying or being killed by Shinra, but she doesn't leave it with this harboring resentment and desire for revenge like Barret does. She still has this like positive outlook on life, and just kind of continues about her day and continuing to live as who she is and not really affected by this. And if she is affected, she's doing a great job at hiding it because we haven't seen it yet.
Or managing, right? Or coping, right? Or she might not even need any of our interventions that we learned in school, right? She might just be doing great.
Yeah,
Seems like it.
exactly.
We'll see
She has
in
her
we'll
own
see in
coping
Rebirth.
mechanisms.
We'll
I
see in
know.
Rebirth. Yeah.
watch all this go out the window once Rebirth comes out. I cannot wait until we do our deep dive for that episode or for that game. So because of this, I did kind of talk a bit about, or I did want to talk a bit about another similar psych concept that tends to occur with people who are held captive. And I don't know if this really has any sort of like official psych diagnosis name. I was going to talk about Stockholm syndrome, which I couldn't find in the DSM. So I assume it is not an officially recognized thing, but I'm everyone, including therapists, will know about it and know of symptoms, of what those symptoms look like and how those symptoms are presented in like some actual recognized disorders such as PTSD. With that being said, Stockholm syndrome, for those who are unaware, it's usually when the person who is like captive falls in love with the abuser or the captor, the person who captured them, or is holding them hostage. And this, can be seen as like a coping mechanism to try and get through this traumatic event. And while we don't see this with Aerith, because we don't see it in this game at all. We don't see her this background part in the game. But then B, even in what we know of her background, she was too young, but we don't even see like her mom suffering from this. But we do see something that is not Stockholm syndrome. It's almost like the reverse of it, where Faz Hicks, who's the one who released them from being experimented on, at least according to this Wikipedia thing, or this fan wiki I read, Faz Hicks fell in love with Aerith's mom. And that is why he ultimately released them, because he felt bad doing these cruel things with him, to them. So I don't know of any sort of disorder that's like reverse Stockholm syndrome. And I was trying to like Google it and look for it, in which like the person who took someone hostage falls in love with the captor. Like, I don't know if that's a thing. Maybe it's a different diagnosis or something. And I was just kind of having fun with this like speculation of trying to like find something to fit Aerith's disorder. So I'm really just talking out of my ass here, but
it's all good, right? I mean,
just cut this.
We're just wondering,
yeah.
Right?
So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting how Faz Hicks ended up falling in love with them, probably from spending all this time with them and then feeling bad for them. But I think that kind of does it for the psychological case study aspect of everything. Yeah. Is there any like last words for Final Fantasy VII before we move on to what else we've been talking about?
Just that just this one memory I have with the game. Do you remember that part where you have to go up to Shinra and you can take the elevator or the stairs? Did you take the stairs?
I did.
Okay, me too.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a thing. I wonder if that's like a psych thing. So for people who are unaware, it's like you have this choice, like to get up to the top of the building, you could either take this long flight of stairs in game, which is literally just running upstairs, or you could take an elevator. But I feel like maybe it could be a gamer thing where we were presented with a choice and we chose the harder option because we thought it might reward us in some way, when in reality that didn't happen and we literally just wasted time. Was there even an achievement for running?
No, I was like, okay, because they're like, even the characters like, well, it'll be quieter, right? We can sneak up on them. Right? And I'm like, okay, those are good points, right? But you hear like Barret in the background just being miserable going up the stairs, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good at all. No, because it's like 65 flights of stairs or something like that.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like,
it was something crazy.
Yeah, and like it actually makes you do it. Like you have to like do it. Yeah, I thought we would get like a fast forward button or something, but we don't.
Was that in the original as well?
I don't think so. Or it might have been, but I don't remember it that it was not that long.
This totally seems like some developer joke. Just like, man, this would be funny if we just put this in and like give them the choice, but just we're not gonna do anything with it. What a weird like quirk to that part. And that part of all things too. Like, why are you gonna put it right there at this pivotal moment in which you're like trying to rescue your friend and like confront the face of the enemy this whole time? That was funny. No, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I was like, we got to talk about this, because I was like, yeah, this is like a moment where I was like, did I get played? Like, what the heck? Could we actually just take the elevator?
Yeah, you can. I'm pretty sure you can, and we just didn't.
Okay. I guess that says something about us, right?
I know. Once again, I thought we were going to be rewarded. At least I thought. So I thought there'd be something for going through the harder route, but that's not always the case. Let that be a life lesson to everybody. Sometimes the harder route is not the best choice.
Right.
Anyways, cool. Well, thank you all at least for staying this long for this podcast. I think that's going to conclude our like psych analysis for Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Mm-hmm.
A game we both loved, and a game who's having a sequel very soon, and we are very excited to play.
Oh yeah.
And we will most likely be doing an episode on that. I don't know when, but I know it's coming. But yeah, I guess with that being said, tell me about what else you've been playing, Joe.
So let's start with Tekken 8, right? Because I know we're gonna get to Like a Dragon, and that might carry us through this podcast. But first of all, thank you for anyone sticking around. We're now gonna get into the section where we just talk about what we've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not interested in that, I understand. Dipping out. But thank you again. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Tekken 8. So, again, I like saying I'm not the fighting game guy, right? But then again, I just spent like
Sure.
20 hours on Tekken 8, right? And the reason why is because I have my brother playing and my cousin as well.
Mhm.
So after we hit the gym or before sometimes, we'll just play Tekken 8. Yeah, we've just
Yeah.
been playing tons of Tekken 8, and it's a fighting game, right? And the way that I like to think about it, it's like it's interesting because it's different because punch, right? Like so square, triangle, X, circle, that represents your limbs. So
Mhm.
square is like,
Mhm.
right punch or left punch or whatever. And X is kick, circle's another kick, and that kind of stuff. You have
Mhm.
combos, right? You have inputs. So it's you against some other person, right? So right now, actually I think like maybe like 15, 16 hours, it was just us playing locally with each other. So
Mhm.
fighting against each other. We've just been doing that back to back, like for hours. There's something about just fighting games that just like you're getting better as you keep playing, right? You're gonna lose a lot, right? Which going online will show you that. Going online will be like, hey, I'm pretty good. No, you're not. You're not good.
Yeah.
Those there are way better people online who have been playing Tekken since Tekken 1 on PlayStation 1, right? This is like the 8th game. There's more games than that because there's like the spin-offs like Tekken Tag Team, Tag whatever, right? But it's a fighting game. You pick a character, go fight other characters, you improve, right? You lose, you win. It's just really fun. I mean, I've put, a lot of
Mhm.
hours into it already, 20 hours with a job and just other commitments, right? You just find that time on the weekend and you're like, all right, now it's time to play Tekken. And the funny thing is, like, when I put the game down, I'm like, all right, I think I'm Tekken out for today, right? Like 30
Yeah.
minutes later, I'm like, damn, I want to play more Tekken. It's
Wow.
a really good, like, fighting game. It's like really, really good. Yeah, I've been playing it. I play King,
Yeah.
which is like the Jaguar guy, right? And I think I mentioned, like,
Mm.
I made a costume for him as a Monkey D. Luffy, right? Give him a red shirt, a straw hat, some blue cutoff shorts or
Blue
whatever.
shorts. Yeah.
I'm just like grappling people. I'm just like doing grapples and just winning and losing, of
There you go.
course, right? It's just so fun. It's a lot of fun.
I've heard nothing but good things about that game. I really wish I had a bit more patience for the fighting games because I would love to get into it too. I would. It sounds like you've mostly been playing like against your family. Have you tried any of the story mode or the adventure mode thing? I
No,
forgot what
so
it's
I
called.
hadn't even touched story mode. I haven't even tried arcade mode or the weird like yeah, it's like an arcade story mode. So
Yeah.
we've all just been playing locally for like I think like 17, 18 hours and jumping online here and there when we get bored of fighting each
Mhm.
other because we get used to each other's like quirks, right? It's like, oh, he's gonna grab after this, right? Oh, he's gonna hit me with
Yeah.
this. I know how to react, right? So we sometimes we'll pick random characters to mix it up because like we get so used to each other and then mentality is like we kind of hate each other. We're like, why do you keep doing that? Like, stop it, But then you go online and you're like, yeah, 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 like do what you did to me and mess that dude up.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's so funny. But yeah, no. So I hadn't even touched story mode or anything, and we've already put 20 hours into it.
That's crazy. Dang. That sounds awesome. I do remember playing Tekken as a kid. I think Tekken 2 or 3 was
Okay.
my
Yeah.
favorite. Whichever one had gone in it, the little dragon,
Oh, okay.
little dinosaur guy who shot the fireballs. I don't know if he's still in the game or not,
No, no, no.
but oh man,
Yeah.
bummer. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Oh, hey, maybe when we hang out again, I'll bring it in and teach you some fighting games.
Yeah, yeah. Teach me, aka kick my ass for like 30 minutes, but no, I guess that's one way to learn. Yeah, no, that's so cool. I've heard great things about that adventure mode and the story mode. I heard it was pretty fun too. There's some podcasters I've been listening to who love Tekken and like love fighting games in general, but they don't play online or against other players. They just play the story modes and stuff.
I see.
And yeah, they were saying that this has been like one of the favorites, if not the favorite, like fighting game, like story mode. I think in particular that arcade quest mode, they really enjoyed because it felt like it did a good job tutorializing the
Hmm.
game, as well as making it feel like a game, since you didn't touch it at all, right?
I played it in the demo, so what essentially it's like
Oh,
you're
okay.
going through an
Yeah.
arcade bracket, right? So it's like if you're going to locals in your own, own neighborhood and fighting people, right?
Mm,
So you become
that
like the
seemed
Tekken
fun.
player, the best Tekken player you can, right, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I love that concept where it's like turning this real life thing into a video game, or like
Hmm.
putting it into the video game. Maybe one day. One
Yeah.
day I'll try it. I mean, I will try it with you, but maybe one day I'll get into it.
Yeah, you never know, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, fighting games are really cool because it's like you against an opponent, right? You're learning. It's a huge time commitment though, especially if you want to learn. I'm not the best at fighting games. Like, no, like I'll just throw a lot of time into them because they're fun.
Mhm.
Maybe we would try it out sometime soon.
Yeah, no, I'd be down. I think the only fighting game where I've kind of tried to learn for like a week was Smash Bros. Like
Oh
the
yeah,
most recent one. Yeah, but then my friend would just play as Joker and just like wipe the floor with me like every time, and then I just got it just wasn't fun to constantly
yeah.
lose, so it was hard to keep on playing. But
I think that's difficult because if someone has a higher skill level than you, you're just gonna get mopped. You're just gonna get wiped.
yeah.
And I watch like a lot of fighting game like YouTubers and personalities, and the idea is like you need someone that's like on your level, like you're both learning.
Mhm.
Having a rival helps. That's not better than like way better than you, but a little bit better than you because you're gonna learn from them, and they motivate you. So that's kind of the idea for fighting games. It's a whole community type thing. Yeah.
It seems very community driven, of just like people trying to find their local fighting game meetups and stuff, and like I love that. I love that concept behind the game. Yeah, it feels kind of like a board game or card game meetup in real life,
Mm,
where you go to the card store and you try to find people to play with or play against.
right.
Yeah, it's got that similar vibe, so I really respect it for that. But one game that I have been obsessing with, that you have as well, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Oh man, that's a really good game. I
It's a
had no
really
idea what
good
I was
game.
missing.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I'm just like, I think we were texting about it, right? It's like, dude, these games are so special, right? Like
Yeah,
there's so much love and work put into them. Yeah, and
I
well, I
do
mean,
anything
what are
to
your
get
thoughts?
Shinran Kasuga. Yeah, no, I mean, since this is my first quote unquote Yakuza game, I know it's since been renamed, since it's always been Like a Dragon in Japanese titles, but at first was a little put off from its kind of realism and making it seem like everything was just super serious and realistic. But once you get to Hawaii in the game, which is like 5 hours in, it feels like everything starts to get really goofy. Or I mean, even before that, with
Yeah.
what's her name? The crawfish
Oh,
that's like on your shoulder,
Nancy,
Nancy or
right?
something.
Nancy, and she
Yeah.
lives in like a clay pot in your apartment, in Ichiban's
Yeah.
apartment, right? And she
I
makes
was just like,
noises and
what the
stuff. Yeah.
hell is this? Yeah, it just comes out of nowhere. But no, I really love that game. It has so much charm, and like everything feels so fun to play. This game has so many other mini games inside of it. Feels
Hmm.
like a lot of Pokemon inspired ones. You have like Pokemon Snap, and then
Taking
where you
picture
have
of
to take a
sickos.
picture of the sickos. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you have the Dondoko Island, which is like their version of Animal Crossing.
I
I
haven't
haven't
gotten to
unlocked
that.
that one yet.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I think someone said like 10 hours in, but I'm about 10 hours in right now. But I
Same.
spent way too much time doing the side quests, so
Same. Same.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, on that note, that even the side quests feel so compelling, very well written. I immediately was like wanted to finish one of the side quest lines just because I wanted to know what happened to this character who's a Japanese tourist who fell in love for someone a local native Hawaiian who is like scamming him for his money.
Hmm.
And then he realizes that he's being scammed, but he doesn't care because he likes the attention behind it and it makes him happy. And oh man, I was not expecting kind of that in-depth commentary on certain social issues in this game, in this Yakuza game. Like I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me your thoughts as like a longtime fan of the series.
Yeah. So I started from Yakuza Zero, right? And I've played all the mainline. Like I caught up, right? And this is a
Mm,
series that's very hard to catch up with because there's so many games. So when they switched
there's a
to like
lot.
turn based in seven, I was like, oh heck yeah, I love turn based, right? And now that they take it forward into 8, right? Now that, and then this combat system has like a little circle, like a little radius you can walk around, right?
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't in 7. So you can position enemies. You get a little green arrow,
Yeah.
and it tells you where the enemy's going to get launched at. So you can kind of line up enemies back to back and just knock them over like bowling pins just by a regular attack. And I'm like, that's so fun. I'm really enjoying this game. I'm 10 hours in. I'm doing a lot of the side quests. I think I mentioned I just unlocked Pound Mates, which is essentially like summons. So you're calling a pound mate, which is like a friend or something that you get from a sub quest or you meet on the street or whatever. You pay like $50 and they show up and they beat up the bad guys for you, which is pretty funny. And they have like a cool cutscene when they get summoned.
Sick.
It's so cool. So that's what I'm doing now, are a lot of the side quests. I've been moving a little bit forward with the main story. It does get serious. Like there is a part where like some guy, like it's like a homeless guy. Like he just, the way that he dies is so messed up. I don't think you've gotten to that part.
Oh no, I did. I did. I was like, oh my God. I was streaming that with my girlfriend, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, dude. I was like,
brutal.
Because you're going from silly fun times, haha, everything's funny.
Yeah.
Hawaii's so sunny, and it gets so serious, and I'm like, holy shit. Like that's really dark. Even
dude is like,
I've played these games.
He's crucified on the wall and like gutted, and it's so intense. In the middle of like an alley in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. I was like, the tonal shift is wild. And this is like the 8th game I'm playing. I'm like, I know they are, but like even that, I was like, holy crap. Like I just got to that part last night. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, like the heck, right?
It's a lot.
Yeah. I was like, dang, like, and those parts wrote me in as well, because it's like, oh yeah, this is a serious game, right? But then you're out here like, Nancy just fell in love with like a hermit crab, and we have to find her. I don't know how, do something with that side quest.
Oh, is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, and because I know she's a summon, she becomes a pound mate summon, right? So she rides on the hermit crab into battle, right? So it's like that kind of side quest where like some of the side quests they'll reward you with like extra things that they're like, oh cool, this makes the game a little bit more wacky or a little bit more fun because it's like it's a crawfish coming to your rescue.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's crazy. I do like how the side quests are a bit more, like you just said, like just wacky and weird. Not trying to be as serious as the main quest, and even the seriousness of the main quest does still hit pretty well. Oh, yeah. Like I still feel very invested in trying to find out what happened to Ichiban's mom right now, like what's going on there. I like how they're introducing like this other like local gang, Hawaiian gang, the Barracudas, and how they like roam the streets at night, like claiming their territory.
On Monday at 10 p.m.? So specific?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What is that? Oh man, I went to Hawaii last year. I don't think I was walking around at 10 p.m.
We know to do next time.
Yeah. Oh God. I know. It does, like, it's totally over exaggerating the violence and everything, of course, because it's trying to, make the gameplay compelling of like there's not like these sketchy people or threatening people like every 10 feet on a block in Hawaii, but that's kind of how it's depicted here in the game. Yeah, low-key just kind of made me want to go back. I'm like missing Hawaii.
Oh yeah. No, I was like, man, maybe I should go to Hawaii, and then I see all this serious shit happen and I'm like, oh, maybe not. Because they're like saying real world stuff like, hey, the homeless population is like really high. We think other states are sending the homeless population here. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I never thought about Hawaii in that way. That it's a very like pricey place to live as well. Huh. They're like throwing like real world, like informing us. And I think that's something I appreciate for this series. They're giving you real info. Not everything's real info, but they throw some stuff in there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we see it a lot in this game. They have a lot of pretty interesting things to say about like a lot of social issues. I mean, the homelessness population was like one of them. The other one that I've noticed is the I guess like the treatment of felons and prisoners and stuff like that. In this case, like the ex-Yakuza. I mean, we see Ichiban, he starts off as just like an employee at an employment agency that's trying to seek like jobs for other people, and all he wants, and he kind of specializes in helping out former Yakuza members like find jobs that are tailored to them, because the rest of society has kind of given up on them. Mm-hmm. It stood out to me because it like kind of shows how a failure of like the society and government to like force a lot of these people into going to crime to make ends meet and to live. And then once they like try to seek help and reform their ways or whatever, they're just kind of cast aside and like
Yeah.
marked with a red X and like told that they can't do this or own a cell phone in like 5 years after their
Yeah, the
Yakuza
5-year
death,
clause, right?
yeah, and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really interesting. And they're kind of funny with their commentary against the police as well in this game. I forgot which side quest it was, where even the police, there's like a policeman who the character crosses like legally in a crosswalk, but he's like, "Hey, did you just jaywalk?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't think so, but I wasn't really looking at my feet, so maybe." And the police was like, "Okay, I'll let it slide this time, but maybe consider donating to the police fund." And he literally pulls out like a
Oh,
box with
donation
a
box,
hole on
yeah.
top. Yeah, a donation box. Or even when Ichiban was like captured initially, and he's like being interrogated by the cops, and then the cop is like, "You're kind of a John Doe here. You have nothing. You have no passport, no ID, no money, and there's a bunch of like mysterious crimes that we
Like
haven't
cold
pinned on
cases,
you yet."
right? Yeah.
Cold cases, yeah. So we're gonna pin them on you. You're gonna be the fall guy for this, even though we know you didn't do it. But we need somebody so that they even say like in the game, like so that the public perception is like sees them in a better way or something, like sees them as like effective. Yeah, I don't know. That just kind of stuck out to me. Their commentary on the social issues, and I know we're gonna be talking about this game as well. I think for like
Oh yeah, the podcast is gonna
an
hear a
episode.
lot about Like a Dragon. Like this game is
Yeah,
huge, right? I even wanted to say, with Ichiban getting like caught, right? I was like, how is he gonna get out of this? He
yeah,
legit just assaults an officer, and I'm like he just hits him and like headbutts him, right, and runs off. And I'm
yeah,
like, I was watching a streamer, and he's like, that is inaccurate. Why are they not shooting Ichiban? And I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
you know what?
I
You're
know.
right. Like,
I was
what?
thinking that too.
Yeah. I was like,
I was like, yeah, go ahead.
and I was like, okay, so he gets like saved by Kiryu, which is like another main character from the other game,
Hmm.
and he's all like, you just committed a felony, right? And then like the rest of the game, I don't even think the cops are even looking for Ichiban anymore, right? Like, you're just walking
Yeah.
around Hawaii, just doing side quests, getting Nancy the crawfish, so
Yeah.
helping her with her love problem or whatever, and I'm like, all right, I guess, guys, but whatever, it's
Crazy.
silly.
I know. Yeah, yeah. It's that dichotomy, that kind of jarring switch between the super serious and then the funny, silly, whimsical stuff, but it does it so well that you don't feel like either side is lacking. It doesn't
Hmm.
feel like, they just threw one of those things in just because. It really feels like they took a lot of time and care into everything in this game. Damn. I was like this morning I ended up playing Pal World for like a couple hours with a friend because it was his first time
All
playing
right,
it.
you were telling me.
I just wanted to kind of help him set up the base and like play the game with him, but I was also just thinking like, damn, I really want to play Yakuza right now. Like it's addicting. It's so good.
It is, and there's so much left to do, right? I'm wondering if we're gonna hit a point where like, oh, dude, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I
kind of
know.
worried
I think
about that.
80 hours is around what some
Really?
people said is like the main. When they were done with the game, the time played was like 80 hours. So I don't know. That's a lot. That's a long game.
Hmm.
And I mean, the next major release for me is going to be Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. So
There's no way I'm gonna be done before that. No way.
yeah. I mean, not if you start Persona 3 as
Oh
well.
yeah, I installed it. I mean, I got the collector's
Yeah.
edition and everything, so it's ready to go. So I'm thinking of just like, hey, one week I'm gonna be working on this game, and the other week I'll be working on this game, and then I'll just throw in Rebirth in there
Damn.
somehow. This is gonna carry me until summer, I believe it. I
I
wouldn't be
I think
surprised.
so too. I mean, then what are you going to do when Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out?
I think I'm gonna wait for a price
March.
drop. Not gonna lie, because I'm like, dude, I have too many
Okay.
games and not enough time. No way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I kind of feel that right now too. I don't think I'm buying anything else until then. I might play Princess Peach Showtime if
Ooh, I
it
thought that was
reviews
cool.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on the reviews for that one because I don't really want to drop money on a platformer that doesn't play well. But we'll
Hmm.
see.
And then we're getting Thousand Year Door, right? The remake.
Oh
That's
my
this year.
god!
And I'm like, dude, no, stop. Like, come on. I
Stop.
don't have enough time. I have the money. I don't have the time though.
Yeah, I know. Bane of being an adult. You know, speaking of other games, like I still hear people like going off on Prince of Persia, and I
Oh yeah.
still would like to play it. Yeah, like people are saying like this is might be one of the best Metroidvania games of all time. I don't know. I played the demo and like, yeah, this is fine, but I didn't see like what they saw just yet. One interesting thing they kept on saying though is that the combat in that game reminded them of a fighting game. It has as much depth as a fighting game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
In terms of just like, yeah, I know. So I was like, maybe Joe will get appealed to it through that that way. Yeah, so that's just another game that I want to play, don't have the time for. Immortals of Avium is another one because I heard an interview with the developer. Do you remember that game at all?
No.
It came out a few months ago. It was branded as like the Call of Duty with magic.
Sounds familiar.
Where it's like a first-person shooter, but you have spells and stuff.
Oh, this was in the showcase recently, right?
Maybe last year's showcase.
Okay.
Because this came out, I think it came out last year for sure.
Yeah, let me look it up because there was something in the showcase that caught my interest recently.
This came out in
Avowed, I think the name was. Avowed.
Oh, Avowed.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking about.
I know that it kind of has a similar name-ish to it, but yeah, this game, Immortals of Avium, didn't do well. And I listened to a very interesting like interview with the lead developer of this game, and he talked about how, just how he put his heart and soul into this, and how he felt like being branded as the Call of Duty with magic was like not very accurate to what he thought the game was about. And how the game flopped on release, and so they had to do a bunch of layoffs and stuff because of it. But of course now that the game is like half off, I think it's $30 as opposed to $70. It is selling very well.
Okay.
And its initial reviews were good too, but there weren't many of them, so it wasn't really like a critical acclaim type of deal. But yeah, just the way he was talking about it, I really want to give it a shot, especially since it's like on sale right now. But yeah, it looks like it's almost 6 months old.
Okay, that's not too old. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Whoever has made it this far, I really commend you. Do something to let us know you listen to this whole thing, and I feel like we gotta reward somebody for being a loyal listener at this point. So do you want to tell them what our next game's gonna be?
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, so our next game is going to be Dead Space. So we're going to be focusing on Isaac Clarke, and we're going to do a little bit something different. So of course we're going to do the case study, right? Me and Brandon were talking about we might not want to do case studies each time, right? It'll get repetitive. But for this one, we're thinking about doing, of course, a case study, but a treatment plan, right? And kind of my experience as an associate therapist, right? What that would look like with someone like Isaac Clarke. So I'm sure you're going to hear about PTSD again, but we're gonna mix it up, and we'll see what we do continuing forward, like how to mix things up so it doesn't get too stale.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think another thing I would like to talk about, maybe during that episode, maybe not, maybe in a future one, is how like some of the psychology behind some of the game design aspects, especially in a horror game, when a lot of thought needs to go into like how to create this atmosphere that scares the player when the player is obviously safe at home playing a video game and not in this real world. So what do you do to draw that player into the game to make them feel like they're there? And yeah, I don't know, just something to talk about for the next episode. But yeah, thank you all again. Do you have any last words for them, Joe?
No, I mean, if you've listened this far, just thank you for that. I appreciate every listener and being able to put all these words into something that's productive. We have so much to say. I mean, we're just gushing about Like a Dragon and had so much to say about Final Fantasy 7, which I'm sure we could have covered way more stuff. But no, thank you.
All right, y'all.